My son Michael texted me happy birthday 3 days late. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he asked why I hadn't reminded him. That same afternoon, I blocked his access to the family trust fund. By midnight, he'd called me 47 times, begging me to pick up the phone. If you're watching this, make sure you subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because trust me, you're going to want to hear how we got here. The devil's in the details. And honey, this devil bites hard. 3 months earlier, I was what you might call a devoted mother. No, scratch that, I was a doormat with a checkbook. At 68, I'd been an ATM for my grown children so long, I'd forgotten how to say no. My late husband, Robert, had left us more than comfortable when he passed 5 years ago. Comfortable enough that Michael and his wife, Nora, could buy their dream home in Westchester, send their kids to private school, and feed Nora's little shopping addiction. Meanwhile, I stayed in the Park Avenue apartment Robert and I had shared for 30 years. Every Sunday, I drove out to Westchester for family dinner. Every holiday, I wrote another check. Every birthday, wedding, graduation, I opened my purse without a second thought. I told myself I was being generous. But in reality, I was being foolish. The signs had been there for a while. Michael only called when he wanted something. Nora could barely look up from her phone during visits, too busy with Instagram or contractors for their latest home project. My grandkids, Emma and Jake, 12 and 14, were polite but distant, treating me like a chore instead of family. And still, I ignored it. Because I believed in family loyalty. I believed love meant sacrifice. I believed that if I just gave enough, they'd appreciate me. What a fool I was. The day before my birthday, I went shopping for ingredients to bake Michael's favorite chocolate cake. The same one I'd made every year since he was 5. My arthritic hands struggled with the mixing bowl, but I pushed through, determined to make something that showed him how much I cared. That morning, I texted him, "Cake's ready whenever you want to stop by." No reply. I waited all day. Every time a car passed, I peeked through the curtains, hoping to see his silver BMW. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt only to sink again when it wasn't him. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon slipped into evening. Evening stretched into another sleepless night. The cake sat untouched on my counter for 3 whole days, going stale right along with my hope. On the 4th day, I threw it out, choking back tears as I scraped Robert's favorite recipe into the garbage disposal. That's when reality hit me like a freight train. My own son had forgotten my birthday. Not late, not delayed, forgotten completely. I'd spent decades putting him first. When he divorced his first wife, I paid his legal fees. When he remarried Nora, I covered their honeymoon to Italy. When they couldn't afford their house down payment, I wrote a check for $200,000. Without blinking, and this was my thanks. Silence on the one day that should have mattered. I was pouring myself a second cup of coffee when my phone finally buzzed. Michael's name lit up my screen, and for a split second, my heart traitor that it is leapt with hope. "Hey, Mom, happy birthday. Sorry it's a few days late. You should have reminded me." Reminded him? As if it were my responsibility to make sure my own son remembered the day I gave birth to him. I stared at that message for 10 whole minutes, reading it again and again, while something cold and heavy settled in my chest where warmth used to be. Should have reminded him. As if I were some acquaintance, not the woman who carried him for 9 months. Who paced the floors through his colicky nights. Who worked 2 jobs to pay for his college tuition. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The old me, Dorothy, the doormat, would have typed back, "Oh, don't worry about it, sweetheart. These things happen." But that Dorothy was gone. The old Dorothy would have made excuses for him. She probably would have invited him over for dinner, tried to smooth things over. Anything to make up for his oversight. But that Dorothy had died somewhere between throwing away that birthday cake and reading his pathetic excuse for an apology. Instead, I called my lawyer, Dorothy. James Richardson's voice was steady, familiar. He'd been our family attorney for 15 years. "What can I do for you today?" "I need to make some changes to the family trust arrangements," I told him. My voice was calmer than I expected. "How quickly can you restructure the distributions?" There was a pause. James knew about the monthly payments to Michael's family. He'd helped set up those automatic transfers after Robert died. "May I ask what prompted this decision?" he said carefully. I almost laughed. What prompted it? 20 years of being taken for granted. A birthday forgotten like yesterday's trash. A text message that treated me like an afterthought. "Let's just say," I answered, "I've had a change of perspective about family obligations." James worked faster than I imagined. By Tuesday afternoon, every automatic payment to Michael's accounts had been suspended. The monthly transfers that covered their mortgage, their car payments. Even Nora's credit cards just stopped. I didn't tell them. Why should I? They'd never asked where the money came from. Never once wondered whether I could afford to bankroll their lifestyle. Never even said thank you for financing their American dream. So I waited, and you know what? The waiting was sweet. For the first time in years, I felt like I held the cards instead of folding every hand. It took exactly 6 days. I was curled up in my favorite armchair, sipping tea and enjoying the silence when my phone started buzzing. Michael's name lit up the screen. I let it ring out. He called again and again. By the 4th call, I was laughing to myself. Where was all this urgency when it came to remembering my birthday? The 5th call came with a text, "Mom, please pick up. There's been some kind of mistake with the bank." A mistake. That's what he called it when the gravy train finally derailed. I poured myself a glass of wine and leaned back, letting him sweat. Lord knows I'd spent enough years sweating, wondering if I was doing enough, giving enough, being enough for children who couldn't even bother to remember the day I was born. The calls kept coming. 7, 8, 9, each one more frantic than the last. By the time I went to bed that night, Michael had called 23 times. Nora had called 6. Together, they'd left 14 voicemails, each one spiraling from confusion to panic. The first ones were mild. "Mom, I think there's been a banking error. Can you call me back?" By voicemail 7, confusion had turned to worry. "Mom, please call us. The mortgage payment bounced. We need to figure this out." By voicemail 12, worry had become full-on panic. "Dorothy, this is Nora. We need to talk now." The last one, left at 11:47 p.m., was pure desperation. Michael's voice was tight, exhausted. "Mom, I know you're angry about the birthday thing. I'm sorry, okay? But this isn't funny anymore. Please call me back. We need that money. We need that money. Not we love you. Not we miss you. Not even we're worried about you. Just we need that money. Perfect. After all these years, he'd finally told me exactly what I meant to them. I switched off my phone and slept better than I had in months. The next morning brought a brand new experience. The sound of someone pounding on my apartment door at 7:30 a.m. I didn't rush. I took my time getting dressed, slipping into a soft sweater and my favorite pearls. If Michael and Nora wanted this conversation, I'd be ready for it and I'd be dignified. Through the peephole, I saw them. Michael was pacing, running his hands through his hair. Nora stood stiff, clutching her designer purse like it was a weapon. I opened the door with a smile. "Good morning, dear. What brings you by so early?" Michael barged past me into the apartment, Nora close behind, her face like thunder. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" Michael demanded. "The bank says all transfers from your accounts have been stopped. Our mortgage payment bounced, our car payments bounced, and Nora's credit cards have been declined." I closed the door and turned to face them. They looked panicked, unsteady like children who'd just realized the world didn't revolve around them. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked pleasantly. "Would you like some coffee?" "We don't want coffee," Nora snapped. "We want to know why you've cut off our money without warning." Our money. How interesting that Nora thought the money I'd earned, inherited, and managed was somehow theirs by right. I walked into the kitchen and began preparing coffee anyway, slowly, deliberately, measuring the grounds, adding the water. Let them watch me move at my own pace for once. "I've been doing some thinking lately," I said conversationally, "about family dynamics, financial responsibility, basic human courtesy. You know, things like remembering important dates." Michael had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Mom, if this is about your birthday, though, it's about so much more than that." I cut him off, turning to face them. "Your birthday slip was just the final straw. Do you know how long it's been since either of you asked how I'm doing? How I'm feeling? Whether I need anything?" They stared at me blankly. "I'll tell you," I went on. 14 months. 14 months since either of you treated me like a person instead of a bank account." Nora stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "That's not fair. We invite you to family dinners. You invite me to dinners where you ignore me while you talk about renovations I'm paying for, vacations I'm funding, and private schools I'm subsidizing. I'm not a guest at those dinners, Nora, I'm the entertainment. The crazy old lady you tolerate because she writes the checks." The silence that followed stretched between us like a canyon. Michael sank heavily onto my couch, the fight draining out of him as he realized I wasn't bluffing. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know we haven't been the most attentive lately, but cutting us off completely, that's extreme." "Extreme?" I echoed. Coming from the son who forgot his own mother's birthday and then blamed her for not reminding him? "Is it really extreme, Michael? Let me put this in perspective." I walked to my desk and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. "In the 5 years since your father died, I've given your family $847,000 in direct payments alone. That's not including gifts, holidays, special occasions, or the house down payment. Just monthly support. Nearly $1 million in cash transfers." Nora went pale. I doubted she'd ever added it all up, and in return, I continued. You've visited me exactly 32 times. That's roughly $26,000 per visit. I've attended 14 family events where I was treated like an obligation. That's about $60,000 per event where I was made to feel unwelcome. You've called me to ask about my health or well-being exactly 7 times in 5 years. 7, Michael. But you've called to ask for money 43 times. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. Because that's exactly what they were, the financial arrangement we had was built on family love and mutual respect, I said calmly. When you stopped showing love and respect, I stopped providing money. Simple economics. Nora finally found her voice. You can't just abandon your family because your feelings got hurt. I looked straight at her. This woman who had never worked a day since marrying my son, who spent my money on designer handbags while barely acknowledging my existence. I'm not abandoning anyone. Nora, I'm simply requiring the same courtesy I've always shown you: acknowledgement, appreciation, basic human decency. If that's too much to ask, then maybe we need to redefine what family even means. Michael leaned forward, his voice slipping into that wheedling tone he'd used as a child when he wanted something. Mom, we can do better. We can call more, visit more. But we need that money. The house, the kids' schools, everything depends on it. Everything you've built depends on my generosity, I corrected. And generosity requires gratitude, not entitlement. I stood up, smoothing down my sweater. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll make you both a proposition. I walked to the window, looking down at the busy street below. From up here, people looked like ants scurrying around with their urgent little purposes. Much like my son and daughter-in-law were about to do. Here's my offer, I said, turning back to face them. You have 30 days to show me that I'm more than just a funding source. Not through desperate phone calls or panicked visits, but through genuine interest in my life as a person. Michael and Nora exchanged glances. I could see the calculation in their eyes already. They were strategizing, plotting the best way to manipulate me back into opening my checkbook. What exactly does that mean? Nora asked carefully. It means treating me like family instead of an ATM. It means remembering important dates without needing reminders. It means asking about my day, my health, my interests, my feelings. It means including me in conversations instead of talking around me. It means showing basic respect for the woman who's been subsidizing your lifestyle. I sat back down, savoring the way they were actually hanging on my words for once. If, after 30 days, I feel valued as a person instead of just a provider, we can discuss resuming some level of financial support. Not the blank check arrangement you've enjoyed, but something more reasonable. Michael's face lit up with sudden hope. We can do that, Mom, absolutely, but I held up one finger. If I detect even the slightest hint of manipulation, if this feels like a performance just to get the money flowing again, the offer is permanently withdrawn. And I do mean permanently. Nora's mask of composure began to crack. What are we supposed to do in the meantime? We have mortgage payments, car payments, the kids' tuition, the same thing millions of families do. I said pleasantly. You'll figure it out. Michael makes a decent salary. You could get a job. You could downsize the house, change schools, sell one of your cars. Live within your actual means. The word job seemed to physically wound Nora. She had married Michael straight out of college and had never worked a day since. The thought of real employment seemed terrifying. You're being incredibly cruel, she whispered. Am I? Or am I finally being honest about what this relationship has become? I stood, signaling the meeting was over. 30 days, I repeated, starting now. And remember, I've had 5 years to perfect the art of detecting genuine emotion versus calculated performance. Don't insult my intelligence by trying to fake your way through this. They left without another word, Nora trembling with fury, Michael looking stunned and lost. After they were gone, I finally poured that glass of wine I'd been craving and settled into my chair. The next 30 days were going to be very interesting indeed. The phone calls began the very next day. Not frantic demands this time, but carefully staged performances that could have impressed Broadway directors. Hi? Mom, just calling to see how you're feeling today. Michael's voice was sugar-sweet through the receiver. I realized we never ask about your health enough. I was standing in my kitchen preparing lunch, and I nearly laughed out loud. In 5 years, this man had never once called to ask about my health unless it was filler before asking for money. I'm fine, Michael. How thoughtful of you to ask. Great. And hey, I was thinking maybe we could have lunch this week. Just the two of us. Like old times, old times? When had we ever had regular lunch dates? I couldn't remember a single time Michael had suggested spending time with me. Without Nora or the kids as buffers. That sounds lovely, I said, curious to see how far this charade would go. Perfect. Oh, and Mom, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about not appreciating you enough. You're absolutely right. We've been terrible family members. The script was almost insulting in its transparency. But I played along. I appreciate you saying that, dear. After he hung up, I glanced at my watch. 47 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Emma. My 14-year-old granddaughter had never initiated a phone call with me in her life. Our interactions were usually limited to polite replies when I asked her direct questions. At family dinners, "Hi, Grandma Dorothy. I just wanted to call and tell you about my day at school." The words sounded rehearsed, like she was reading from cue cards. Poor child. Her parents had clearly coached her. "That's wonderful, Emma, tell me all about it," and she did. She launched into a cheerful, detailed monologue about her classes, her friends, her teachers. Everything was wonderful and amazing. And she just couldn't wait to share it all with her beloved grandmother. It broke my heart, not because she was lying, but because this forced conversation revealed how little we actually knew each other. Her parents had weaponized their own daughter, turning her into a pawn in their desperate game. When she finished, I said gently, "Emma, sweetheart, you don't have to do this." "Do what, Grandma?" "Pretend to be interested in talking to me because your parents told you to call." There was silence on the other end. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller, more genuine. "Dad said you were mad at us. That maybe you wouldn't be our grandma anymore if we didn't try harder. Those bastards. They terrified their own children just to manipulate me." Double quotes. "Emma, listen to me carefully. I will always be your grandmother, no matter what happens between me and your parents. That will never change. Do you understand?" "Yes, Grandma." "Good. Now, do you actually want to talk to me? Or would you rather go do whatever 14-year-olds do when they're not being forced to call their grandmothers?" She giggled, and for the first time she sounded like herself. "Can I go? I have homework." "Of course you can go. I love you, Emma." "Love you too, Grandma." The manipulation had officially begun on day 5. Flowers arrived. A massive arrangement of white roses and lilies sat on my doorstep with a card that read, "Thinking of you always. Love, Michael and Nora." I'd never received flowers from them before, not for my birthday, not for Mother's Day, not even when Robert died. But now, when they needed my money, suddenly they could spare $200 for an ostentatious display. I placed the flowers on my dining room table and waited for the follow-up call. It came within the hour. "Hi, Mom. Did you get our little surprise?" Nora's voice was artificially bright. "They're lovely. Thank you. I just wanted you to know how much we appreciate everything you've done for us over the years. I know I haven't always been the best daughter-in-law, but I want to change that." The best daughter-in-law. This woman had barely spoken to me in 2 years, except to make snide remarks about my clothes or my cooking. "That's very kind of you to say, Nora. I was wondering if you'd like to go shopping this weekend. Maybe get our nails done. Have a girls' day." A girls' day with the same woman who once told Michael I was too needy when I'd called to check on them during a hurricane. "I'll think about it," I said. That day 8 brought a handwritten letter from Jake, my 12-year-old grandson. His normally awful handwriting was surprisingly neat, which told me he'd been made to write several drafts. "Dear Grandma Dorothy," it began. "I have been thinking about how awesome you are and how I don't tell you enough. You are the best grandma in the world and I love you so much. I hope we can hang out more and do fun things together. Love, Jake." The letter was sweet, but it reeked of parental coaching. Jake had never used the word awesome in his life, and he certainly had never expressed a desire to hang out with me that evening. I called Michael. The letter from Jake was very touching. I said, "Oh, that was all his idea. He's been feeling really bad about not being closer to you." "Michael, stop." "Yes, stop lying to me. I know you coached him to write that letter just like you coached Emma to call me." "Silence, Mom. I don't know what you—" "Stop, just stop. If you want to rebuild our relationship, it has to be based on honesty, not performances, not manipulations, not scripted phone calls from confused children. We're trying to show you we care. You're trying to show me you can follow a script when money is on the line. There's a difference." I hung up, exhausted. This wasn't working the way I'd hoped. Instead of real change, I was watching them bury themselves deeper in deception. But I'd given them 30 days, and I was a woman of my word. I just wasn't sure how much more amateur theater I could stomach. 2 weeks into their performance, I discovered something that changed everything. I was having lunch with my friend Margaret at our favorite cafe when she mentioned seeing Nora at the country club. She was telling everyone about your mental breakdown, Margaret said, her voice carefully neutral. She said you've been acting erratic since Robert died, making impulsive financial decisions. The coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. "What?" "Apparently, you've become difficult to manage, and they're considering having you evaluated for competency issues." The words hit me like a physical blow. While they were sending me flowers and love letters, They were simultaneously laying the groundwork to have me declared mentally unfit. Margaret, are you absolutely certain? Dorothy, I've known you for 30 years. You're the sharpest-minded person I know. But Nora was very convincing. She had several women nodding along sympathetically. I spent the rest of lunch in a daze. When I got home, I immediately called James Richardson. James, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Has anyone contacted you asking about my mental state or financial competency? There was a long pause. Dorothy, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Michael called last week. He said he was concerned about some unusual financial decisions you'd been making. He asked about the process for having someone's competency evaluated. My hands started shaking. What did you tell him? I told him that you were completely competent and that any such evaluation would be a waste of everyone's time. But Dorothy, the fact that he asked, I know what it means. After I hung up, I sat in my chair and stared at those white roses they'd sent. Every petal suddenly looked like a lie. Every fragrant bloom was part of an elaborate deception designed to make me look unstable. When I inevitably rejected their fake affection, they weren't trying to win me back. They were building a case against me. I thought about all the carefully orchestrated phone calls, the sudden interest in my well-being, the flowers, the children's letters. It wasn't love. It was evidence. Evidence that they were caring, attentive family members dealing with a difficult, irrational old woman who'd cut them off without cause. The revelation should have crushed me. Instead, it filled me with a cold, calculating fury I hadn't felt since I was young enough to fight dirty. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they'd forgotten that I'd been playing this game a lot longer than they had, and I was much better at it. I spent the weekend planning. By Monday morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. First, I called James and scheduled an appointment for a complete mental competency evaluation with the most respected neuropsychologist in Manhattan. Dorothy, you don't need to, James started. Yes, I do. When this is over, I want documentation that I'm of sound mind and capable of making my own financial decisions. Next, I called Michael. Mom, how are you feeling today? The fake cheerfulness was starting to grate. Actually, Michael, I've been doing some thinking about our conversation, and I've decided you're right. About what? About resuming the financial arrangements. I've been too harsh, too emotional. I miss our family dinners. I miss being part of your lives. I want to fix this. The relief in his voice was palpable. Mom, that's wonderful. I knew you'd come around. You're such a loving, generous person. I want to have dinner this Friday. All of us, including Emma and Jake. I want to apologize properly and discuss how we move forward. Of course. Nora will be so relieved. She's been worried sick about you. I'll bet she has. That afternoon, I made another call to a private investigator named Patricia Chen, someone James had recommended for discreet family matters years ago. When Robert was having business partner issues, Mrs. Patterson, I need to know everything about my son and daughter-in-law's financial situation. Bank accounts, credit cards, debts, assets, spending patterns. I also need you to check if they've been consulting with any attorneys recently. Something feels off about their behavior. Patricia had already done preliminary work on my family during Robert's business disputes, so she had existing files and contacts. Her updated report arrived Thursday morning, and it was even worse than I'd suspected. Michael and Nora were drowning. Beyond the obvious expenses I'd been covering, they had racked up massive credit card debt. Nora's shopping addiction was far more severe than I'd realized. They owed money on both cars, had taken out a second mortgage on the house, and were behind on Jake's tuition payments. But the most interesting discovery was a bank account I didn't know about. An account where they'd been depositing and immediately withdrawing large sums of money for the past 2 years. My money. They'd been taking the funds I provided and moving them through a separate account before paying their bills. Why would they do that unless they were planning something? The answer came in the form of financial planning documents. Patricia had uncovered documents showing that they'd been working with a lawyer to establish guardianship over my assets since Robert's death. It started right after the funeral, when I'd been grief-stricken and making large financial gifts to cope with my loss. They'd been planning this for 5 years. The gradual distance, the increasing demands, the casual cruelty. It had all been designed to establish a pattern. The generous but unstable widow who needed protection from her own poor judgment. I'd thought I was teaching them a lesson about respect and gratitude. They'd been playing a much more dangerous game. Friday dinner was going to be very interesting indeed. Friday evening, I sat at the head of Michael and Nora's dining room table, watching them perform their greatest hits of fake affection. They'd gone all out for this dinner, their good china, even candles. Emma and Jake actually seemed genuinely happy to see me, which was the only real bright spot in this elaborate production. Mom, you look wonderful. Nora gushed, though her smile never reached her eyes. That dress is so flattering. I was wearing the same black dress I'd worn to Robert's funeral. She'd complimented it before, back when she was still pretending to like me. Thank you, dear. You look lovely as always. Michael raised his wine glass. I want to make a toast to family, to forgiveness, and to Mom for being the most generous, loving woman we know, to Grandma. Emma and Jake chorused. Their enthusiasm was genuine enough to make my heart ache. We made it through the appetizer and main course with their performance in full swing. They asked about my health, my hobbies, my plans for the holidays. They laughed at my stories, complimented my jewelry, and treated me like the beloved family matriarch they'd never actually considered me to be. It was masterful, really. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have been fooled. After dessert, I stood up. I have something I want to say to all of you. Michael and Nora leaned forward expectantly, probably anticipating my tearful apology and a promise to restore their funding. These past 2 weeks have been so enlightening. Michael, your sudden interest in my daily health has been touching. Nora, your invitation to go shopping was so thoughtful. And children, your letters and phone calls have meant the world to me. They were practically glowing with anticipation. It's made me realize how much I've been missing, how important it is to be truly involved in each other's lives. Michael nodded eagerly. Exactly. That's exactly what we've been trying to show you, which, I said, is why I've decided to be much more involved in managing all of our affairs. I met with James Richardson yesterday to review the family trust documents. Nora's smile flickered slightly. I also had a complete psychological evaluation done just to make sure I'm making sound decisions. Clean bill of mental health. As it turns out, Michael's face went pale, and I hired a private investigator to do a thorough financial review. Very thorough. The silence in the room was deafening. I reached into my purse and pulled out Patricia's report, setting it on the table between us. Did you know it's illegal to establish financial guardianship over someone through fraudulent means? James was quite concerned when he reviewed your planning documents. Nora stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't know what you think you found, but I found 5 years' worth of evidence that you've been systematically setting me up to be declared incompetent, so you could control my assets permanently. The separate bank account, the guardianship paperwork, the witnesses you've been cultivating who can testify to my erratic behavior. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. Mom, it's not what it looks like, really. Because it looks like fraud. It looks like elder abuse. It looks like to people who decided it was easier to steal from me than to earn their own living. Emma and Jake were staring at their parents with horrified expressions. Here's what's going to happen, I continued calmly. You're going to pack up and move out of this house by the end of the month. The house I bought, by the way, which means I can evict you whenever I choose. You're going to get jobs, real jobs, and start living within your means. And if you ever attempt to contact me again, I'll file criminal charges. James assures me we have more than enough evidence. I walked to the door, then turned back one final time though, and I'm changing my will. The entire estate goes to charity now. Congratulations, Michael. Your greed just cost you $47 million. The same $47 million you thought you could steal through fraudulent guardianship. The drive home was peaceful. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Some lessons cost more than others, but watching my son learn that respect isn't optional was worth every penny. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.